in part one of our introduction to our book Shadow Tech, I talked about some of the overreaching concepts that we deal with in this book. But one of the most primary features of this work is a phenomenon that we generally refer to as the virus. And basically this is our way of explaining and exploring the nature of the way that the human shadow actively manifests in our own lives and manifests externally in our society. And so we use a number of different conceptual tools to try to model this. But maybe Melissa could talk a little bit about how this viral nature of the human shadow, how this works.
Yes. So have you ever really wondered and looked at your own thoughts, your own destructive thoughts, and ask where do they come from? And sometimes you have destructive thoughts that actually can take you over and make you do things that you know you shouldn't do.
So like addictions, for example, is a good example of that.
That's a good example.
But not just addictions.
Not just addictions. It can be so many things.
Mm-hmm.
So we personally felt that we started watching our thoughts and realized that we were asking those questions to ourselves, and then you started studying biology.
Yeah, we noticed that
Right.
our own relationship conflicts had a sort of parasitic cycle, a viral kind of a cycle to them. And we noticed it wasn't just ourselves, it was our parents, it was all our friends, and it was basically a destructive patterning in relationship conflicts, but it was also similar in self-destructive behavior.
Right.
And we noticed that it had this sort of viral parasitic signature to it.
Right.
So I started looking at the way viruses and parasites look in biology, and then that brought us to some other authors.
Right.
Right.
Jonathan Zapp.
Right, we found Jonathan Zapp.
And Paul Levy.
We found Paul Levy.
And Colin Wilson.
Colin Wilson.
And this was already after we started figuring this out, that if in biology, because as we said before, we're looking at thing in a systems way, as above, so below,
Mm-hmm.
Holarctic way.
Holarchically, yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So we figured that if in biology
Mm-hmm.
that viruses work in a certain way, and that there are more parasites
Right, than any other parasitic relationships are the most common kinds of relationships in the in the biosphere, in the planetary biosphere.
Exactly.
Parasitism is extremely prevalent.
Right, and then we even studied some of the actual parasites and how they operate, and they're very clever, actually.
Yeah, they use trickery and subterfuge in order to trick their host into doing something that benefits the parasite, but may not necessarily be good for the host.
Right.
And this sort of started to look like, hey, this looks like functions that are going on in our own inner conflicts.
Right.
Hey, this looks like our economy.
Right.
Hey, this looks like the way our politics works.
Right.
This parasitic kind of a structure is everywhere in the culture.
Right.
And in our minds, right?
And yeah, so we figured that if it is operating on all these different levels, then it's also operating in the psychic, mental,
Right.
spiritual realms.
Right, of course.
Which would actually explain, there's a lot of people in metaphysics and into UFOlogy and some of these alternative theories like archons and demonic possession, all these things, that this can be explained if there is a realm of which we would call a viral realm in every level of
Right.
reality.
Exactly. If for every holon or every different systemic level of organization in the universe and in life, you would have a destructive dynamic that would be parasitic and viral in nature. If there is something fundamentally, if there is something about the way the destructive force in the universe works that is explained by understanding viral and parasitic relationships, then we should be able to learn from studying the way systems destroy themselves at different levels, and then transposing that back as to what's going on in ourselves and in our culture.
Right, and then bringing it back into our own journey as far as healing ourselves. That what we've found is that these parasitic systems, I call energy systems, actually are feeding on parts of us that are repressed trauma.
Yes.
And they cause a chemical reaction.
Right.
And these cycles can get continued, and these can be passed on as intergenerationally as like a family virus, or it can be passed on by just a single traumatic event, such as sexual abuse, or getting, or say like an Afghani vet having PTSD could also
Right, these are trigger points.
Right.
These are you can have a traumatic experience, whether you can have a traumatic experience that becomes an opening.
Right.
It becomes an actual psychic fracture that becomes a source of available energy
Right.
for a destructive viral cycle to begin.
Right.
What we might call a destructive or a viral script.
Right.
You can also, like she said, you can explain entities or demonic
Yes.
possession in this way.
The other thing is that if you don't take care of the initial trauma by doing some of these emotional clearing practices that we talk about, then this system can actually get bigger, get fed, keep the cycle creating, and then actually become a bigger system, which would actually make sense when you look at people who are totally taken over, murderers, people who do just absolutely what you would consider insane things. Of how we think that they're just being taken over by this viral system, by a viral system.
Yeah, like if you want to try to explain, if you look at people who commit incredibly destructive or evil acts in society, either upon themselves or upon others, and you look at the sort of process, or if you listen to their testimony and sort of look at the way these things happen, you'll see that what happens is people start to become taken over increasingly by some kind of an intelligent force within them. The Jungians would say that there is a shadow archetype manifesting inside their psyches that's sort of getting access to their personality. And I would say that that's accurate. But you could also look at that in a way of, let's say, like informational theory. You can look at, if you looked at the human psyche as an operating system, you could see these destructive scripts, these patterns, as malicious scripts, as viruses, because they use the same name in information systems as they do in biology. Or again, like in parasitism, where basically a parasite takes over the host and uses the host for its own whatever energetic needs are at the expense of the host. So this is the kind of, these are the kinds of dynamics that are going on inside the human being. And one of the interesting things about this is that we're all subject to this. It's not just some wild person who just these occasional examples of people going ballistic and shooting a bunch of people at a school or whatever, or a terrorist incident. It's not just those things. Those are the far end of it.
I mean, why is there such an incredible ramp up of suicides among vets. I mean, there's
That's
so many.
another sort of extreme example of it.
But is it really? I mean, there's thousands and thousands. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know the exact number, but it's a ridiculous
Yeah.
number. But
Yeah.
but anyway, these energetic systems are really powerful, and they are having a major effect on our individual lives and our culture. And we believe that we have to have proper management techniques to manage this in our psyche. And that's why we need to understand how this operates.
Yeah, one example that I've heard Jonathan Zapp give, which is good, is how that 200 years ago we as a culture did not have any understanding of the microscopic realm of microbes and viruses and bacteria and all of that. We had no understanding of that. So when you'd have biological plagues, they were explained as the work of God or the devil or of demons or things like this. So I think now we're just now entering into a time when we can start to really understand that the domain of the human mind, which has the external correlate of that is the culture itself. These are energetic informational domains which are mediums for information and energy transfer, some of which is viral, destructive, parasitic scripts, which are basically being transmitted all over the place. We do it to each other, and through media, through our conversations, through our body language, through all kinds of mechanisms, we transfer destructive programs to each other. And if we don't have any understanding of the source of these things, and like you said, they're sourced in trauma, they're sourced in dysfunctional child raising, they're just sourced in the way that the society operates itself. And we are, as a society, basically infested by energetic informational parasites. We're basically infested. And this is what spiritual techniques, this is what the yogic and Buddhist types of techniques that come from the East, these were what they were about. They were
Right.
about keeping your psyche clean,
Right.
keeping your awareness high on your internal
Right.
state so that you could manage these destructive patterns.
Yeah, the other thing is any kind of practice where you're invoking the heart chakra is what we found. We have a saying, the heart is toxic to the virus. That love or the heart energy actually neutralizes that destructive energy.
Absolutely, and we can give all sorts of examples of that.
Right.
But the difficult thing is that to actually manifest a psychic state that is full of that heart chakra energy is difficult when you are already programmed for all kinds of other psychic chemical states which
Right.
are in opposition to that.
That's
So you have to clear out some
Right.
of this oppositional energy, and it takes time. This is spiritual work. This is alchemical work, and it takes time. And you have to start opening this up because it's not really possible to. I mean, you can have peak experiences, obviously, and we do.
yes.
And you can have a peak experience that just opens up your heart. I mean, I had one where for 6 days I couldn't even think of anything negative because that was activated. But then that goes back down to your normal life again. And so we need to start to develop cleaning, clearing, maintenance practices. And we need a real cognitive understanding of what the domain of the psyche is, of what the shadow is, of how destructive scripts are shared throughout society, and how to see the signs of that behavior,
Yes.
of that patterning, and take a proactive approach.
Yes, so this is a big part of our investigation, and we feel that it's very important to have very serious conversations about this. We invite anyone who has done any research into this that can share their own perspective of how this works, because we do feel like it should be a whole new science.
Well, absolutely. No, absolutely. The destructive force in the universe and how it manifests in all these different levels of organization and life, it needs to be looked at as its own science. But our book Shadow Tech is the first release of this information that we've come to over the last few years, and this book will be updated periodically. And yes, we look forward to your comments and anything that you have. That if you, like she said, if you've been doing your own serious investigations, we definitely welcome whatever work that you have done. Bring it to the table for
Yes.
us. So shadowtechbook.com and livinginthemovie.com.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you.